Hello there and welcome to the Card Grotto. Today I have a Christmas ornament card to share with you using hot foiling, ink blending and die cutting. So let's get started. This is the Hero Arts 3 Holiday Messages hot foil plate, and I'm taking the sentiment that says Merry Christmas and I'm going to foil it onto some Hero Arts Nautical cardstock, and I'm using Spellbinders champagne foil to do that. So I like to do my hot foiling by holding everything down to the cardstock, kind of like I would do if I was die cutting. Everyone does hot foiling slightly differently. This method just happens to work for me. So I'm cutting that piece of foil down, trying to make sure that it's not too much bigger than the actual foil plate itself. I find that that helps with overfoiling. And then I'm going to hold that down with some low tack tape. I've then got my Spellbinders Glimmer hot foil system heating up. I have turned that panel over so that the foil plate is facing down towards the platform of the Glimmer hot foil system. I've pressed that timer button, that is flashing. Whilst it's flashing, it is heating up. Once it goes solid green, it means it's ready to go. So I can remove the platform from the base and then I can add the shims on top. Some people like to add the shims while it's heating up, and I like to add them afterwards. Again, everyone does hot foiling in a slightly different way, I think. I'm then going to run that through my Platinum 6 machine here, and I like to run it through fairly slowly, and I do only like to run it through once. I don't like to run it through back and forth. I'm then going to place the platform back in the base. I don't actually need it to heat up again because I'm just foiling the one sentiment today, but it's always out of habit that I like to pop it back in so that it's ready to go if I want to do any more foiling. I can then carefully remove that tape, and I do like to remove all of the tape first before I actually lift the plate up. So I can just carefully remove that other side there, and then I can lift that up. And then I got a pretty good impression. I did get a little bit of overfoiling between the letters on the merry word. So I'm taking a mono sand eraser and I'm just using that to remove that foil. Just being really careful here because the area is quite tiny in between the letters. So I am holding that eraser kind of straight up and down. So it is a little bit difficult to see here on camera what I'm doing, but I'm literally just removing that foil from the cardstock. So that looks pretty good now, so I can do my die cutting. I'm taking the Hero Arts Ornament Fancy dies. This is a great set and you can use it in lots of different ways. There are pieces that you can add inside of the ornaments to create some patterns. You can do really kind of fun die cut inlay and things like that, but I'm literally just using the outline today. I thought it would look quite nice with the sentiment inside, and I thought that they worked really well size wise. So I've placed that ornament on top of the card panel, and then I can hold that down with some low tack tape and run that through my die cutting machine. So I've got my ornament piece here, and I'm going to die cut the ornament topper from some Hero Arts gold glitter paper. That's from the Holiday Sparkle set. And then I want to add a little bit of foliage around my ornament. So I'm taking the Hero Arts Winter Foliage Stamp and Cut XL set, and I'm just using the foliage here. And I'm going to cut that from some Hero Arts Meadow cardstock and also pine cardstock. So just holding those down with some low tack tape, and then I can run those all through my die cutting machine. I do want to add a little bit of ink blending on top, so I'm holding them down onto a sticky mat. I am cutting these pieces down a little bit. I know that I don't want a huge amount of foliage around the ornament, and so I thought that I would just cut them down so they were a little bit smaller. I'm then taking Hero Arts Pine Core ink, and I'm just going to add a little bit of that to the inside of these kind of leaf fronds. I do like to go in layers rather than kind of go in heavy to start with, so I can really blend that out so that the inside is the darker colour, and then on the outside tips of the leaves is the colour of the cardstock. So just using a small ink blending brush here because these pieces are really quite tiny. I didn't need a bigger brush. And then cutting down these pine pieces here as well. so that it's going to be two separate pieces instead of one piece. And I can just do the same thing for the other one there. And I'm just using a little bit more of the pine core ink just to add that towards the bottom of these fronds. I suppose they're kind of pine branches really, aren't they? The colour doesn't really make a huge amount of difference on those, but like once it dries, it does dry a little bit lighter, but it's still nice just to have that added interest. And then I'm going to add a little bit of ink blending around the outside of this ornament here. I'm using Hero Art's Nautical core ink, which is the same colour as the cardstock. I did struggle a little bit with the blending brush on the sticky mat, so I'm just adding some removable adhesive onto a scrap piece of paper, then popping the ornament on top, and I found that a little bit easier for me to add the ink blending on this piece. So I'm using a medium ink blending brush here, going around the outside of that ornament, and then I'm taking pitch black core ink and adding a little bit of that onto a small blending brush, and then just going around the outside edges of that ornament. And because my card is so clean and simple, just adding this little bit of ink blending on all of the pieces really does make quite a big difference. Just adds a little bit of dimension, and you can see here that on the Nautical cardstock you can really see how that ink blending really does just help that ornament pop. So I am going to add a little bit of ink blending on my card base as well. I've got a top folding A2 size card base here, so that's a finished size of 4¼ inches by 5½ inches once the card base is folded. So I've masked off the back of the card base here so I can just add the ink blending onto the front panel. So I'm going around first with that Nautical core ink, then just using the residual ink left on the pitch black brush, just going around the outside edges there, and then I can bring back in that Nautical brush again just to really blend that out so I can get a smooth blend. And once these inks dry, they do really dry nicely onto the card. So I can remove that memo tape here, and as I'm removing it you can see the difference between the cardstock that's got the ink blending and the cardstock that hasn't. So it does make quite a big difference, even though it doesn't necessarily look like it is. I've then got some Hero Arts precision glue, and I'm adding a little bit of that towards the bottom of the ornament topper so that I can adhere that down onto the ornament. And I realised here that it was going to be a little bit difficult for me to see what I was doing because of my dark craft mat there, so I'm just bringing in a scrap piece of paper so that I can pop that on top. It's going to give me a little bit more contrast to see where I want to place the ornament topper, and because I'm using that liquid glue I've got time to kind of wiggle it in place. I'm then going to add some foam tape onto the back of the ornament, and I just want to make sure that I do add a piece there at the top to give that kind of ornament topper some extra stability. So just adding all of that foam tape onto the back of the ornament, and then I'm taking some DMC gold thread here, and I have doubled this up so that I can create a double bow. It is a little bit slippery, this thread, so it did take me a little while to kind of get it in place, and then I can tie that in a bow. And then I can just cut those tails off, and I'm cutting them at different lengths just to give it a little bit more interest. I'm then adding some more of the precision glue on to the foliage pieces, and because these foliage pieces are really very thin, I got way too much glue than I needed, so I'm just using that scrap piece of paper to dab off the excess glue, and then I can pop those behind the ornament. The ornament isn't stuck down, I'm just using it as a placeholder to start with so that I can see where I wanted all of this foliage to be. I did stick it down really quite well at this point, and I wish that I hadn't, because I did want to move some, so I learnt my lesson, and when I was doing the ones at the top I didn't really stick those down, I just kind of placed them down. So I'm sticking this one here, and then I realised that I needed an extra pine branch, so I did die cut another one of those to pop that in place. And like I say, when I do the top part here, I'm just really placing them down lightly. I'm not actually pressing them down at all, so that I can move them if I want to. And that is always the benefit of using the liquid glue. So I can just pop the last one down here, and then I am going to take a scrap piece of paper so that I can really press those down. I didn't want to do that with my fingers just in case I had any glue on them or anything like that. I can then remove the backings off of the foam tape, and then I can pop that down onto the card. Just trying to sort of hover it in place to start with, make sure that it's straight before I press that down. And it's a really simple card, but all of those extra kind of elements with the ink blending and things like that, and having that kind of double bow at the top as well, I do think makes quite a big difference. And I did add some gold gems at the end just to add a little bit of extra sparkle. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar on YouTube and also over on my blog. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you soon.